Hello, Service Learning students. It's Monday, July 9th. I wanted to just touch base here with you as we enter this new phase in our coursework. I'm on our main page of our course, and you'll see that today we start Unit 3. Those of you who went through the materials I posted in Lesson 10 know that I opened up all the Unit 3 materials last week so that you could take a look at it in units and lessons. And so that's really where you need to be concentrating your efforts right now. You need to be in that Unit 3 area, completing the lessons this week and completing all the materials that are part of your service logs. I'm going to go over that in just a second, but I did want to take just a moment to congratulate everybody for getting their proposals, their final proposals submitted to me. I've had a chance to go through and review them, and they all the files came through okay. And so now the next step will be for me to assign some grades on those, and I will be doing that this week. Some really interesting projects are lined up, and I'm really excited to see how you guys work out the service over the next 2 weeks, because that is the concentration now in Unit 3. We have a proposal to do some summer sports activities with youth. We have 2 proposals where your classmates are going to be working on issues related to food insecurity and food kitchens and that sort of thing. There's one proposal that deals with the aging population and an activity involving nursing homes or a care center. There's a project that involves publicity and websites and information gathering and helping out with an HIV/AIDS counseling service. And there's a proposal to work with an organization that deals with domestic abuse. So these look really exciting, and I'm looking forward to those. And I appreciate very much everybody getting their proposals in. And for those of you who have been involved in the Friday forums actively, I have not updated the points on those, but I've been reading your responses over the 3 weeks that we spent going through this book of journalism that sort of highlights many cases of people who have made a difference in their local communities and the challenges they faced. Those of you who participated in those forums did a really wonderful job, and I appreciate the comments and the back and forth in those discussions. And we had a few people who responded to the Friday forum for the novel, and it seems to be some really good questions posted so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you deal with sort of a more sort of well, fictionalized but a more dramatic sort of story that really puts kind of characters and events together in a way that sort of addresses some of the issues that were somewhat similar to some of the elements that were part of this. So that's where we're at with the course. Those are my kudos. That's my praise for you all. I want to just say that I know it's a lot of work to do a 16-week course online and in 8 weeks, and I know it's a lot of work to do these service projects on your own. And so I'm going to transition now in my little talk to you today to cover some very important elements of the course going forward. But before I do that, having given a lot of praise to you all, I want to just say a few things about the projects as they've come in. So here we are, we're in Unit 2, where we had the main resources posted for completing your proposals. And I'm going to click on the project proposal guidelines, which you should be familiar with. And this handout is very detailed, and we spent many weeks going over this, and I posted many of these video lessons, and I'm just wanting to really stress to you now that there's a similar handout for Unit 3 that has to do with your actual service logs and reporting all that material. And so, having had a chance to look at your proposals now, your final proposals, of course, 2 weeks ago when you submitted drafts of these, I provided quite a bit of detailed feedback on your proposals at that time. And for the proposals that came in, I would say about half the proposals followed mostly this format that was in the handout, and about half did not, or at various sort of levels of that. This project, the proposal is worth 200 points. It'll take me a couple of days to assign the points on all those, but I wanted to tell you now as a class some of my collective thoughts on this. First of all, this is a 100 level class. It's an introductory class. So I don't want you to freak out too much about how strict or stringent I'm going to be in reviewing your proposals. The writing component is part of it. There's an overall sort of grading scheme that I'll go over here in just a second. But I want you to be aware that I understand that this is a 100 level course. Having said that, some of the proposals that have come in are not in the proper format still. They don't follow this title page, abstract, section 1, section 2, section 3. So that's a bit of a problem. And then couple of the proposals in the part 2 and part 3 specifically are pretty skimpy in detail about your community partners, what you're specifically going to be doing. And in part 3, where you're supposed to argue for how your service is going to address the part 2 elements, the problems in your community, many of you or some of you who submitted your proposals, you're going to see some points taken off there because you didn't really follow the instructions, which ask you to make a case by pointing to outside sources and research supporting your approach. This is the inquiry part of the course. All FYI courses are supposed to have this element attached, and so that's why that is sort of a very important element. As you see in the formula at the top of the handout, 15% for your background, 30% for your inquiry, 30% for your action plan, and then 25% for your bibliography. I had a couple of students that just didn't turn in a bibliography at all, which is supposed to have 10 sources. I know that this is a challenge, but this again is part of the first year inquiry. We want to see that college students can do some basic research and write about external sources, and it's an important part of the project. And so if you did not complete that element of the proposal, you're going to have some lower scores on that. Now, we didn't talk a whole lot about this, but in that area, in Unit 2, I'm still in Unit 2 under Writing Resources, you see the Value Writing rubric is listed. And this is the grading sheet that I will use this week to assess your final scores on these projects. And what you'll see there is that there are these major categories, and with that basic formula of 15, 30, 30, and 25%, roughly sort of that sort of emphasis is placed, I use these different categories to assign points. So the first point is context and purpose of writing. That's here at the top of the rubric. And you can go through the language here and see when you get your papers back whether you have done well in this category or not. And so for some of you, you have set up your projects beautifully, you've talked about your background information, you think of an external audience, we understand what your proposal is doing, and you will have, more towards the 10 on that. Some of you did not follow the instructions very clearly at all in my handout, and so your reports are not very clear, and so you might be closer to this end of the spectrum on those points. Okay? For those of you who have very short projects, not a lot of content in your material, that's an important element. So content development, if you have addressed all the questions in the handout, if you have done the work, you should have a better grade on this. And if you've done less of the work, if you didn't complete all 4 sections, keep in mind that I posted several student examples and posted several of these video lessons taking you through what an actual effective proposal looks like, your A-type proposal. And you'll note that those proposals are between 2,000 and 3,000 words. Every one of those sections is for 2 or 3 pages, filled out in a lot of detail. And so that's going to be a big impact on your final grade on that. Genre and disciplinary conventions, I asked you to complete things in APA format, to cite outside sources. So that's covered in this part here. And I'm not extremely strict on that. It is a factor in determining a portion of the grade here. I'm pretty lenient on this because this is an introductory course, but nonetheless, the expectations are in the handout that it'll be formatted in a certain way and it'll be in APA format. The more important element is the sources and evidence. And for those of you who didn't really go into doing outside research to support your project and your claims, who didn't do the 10 sources, who didn't do the annotated bibliography, you're going to have an extremely low score on this part of that. And then, of course, how's your overall writing skills, your sentences, and your punctuation. I tried to mark several of those things in your rough drafts a couple weeks ago and give you some resources to correct those, so it's fair now to ask to see some improvement in that. So all these scores will be added up, and that percentage will then be used to assign the 200 points total for your final proposal. I give you all that information about the grading and everything because I want you to be successful now in the last part of this course, the last part of the push here, and you're kind of going out on your own when you're doing this field service now. And I want you to, be able to sort of, those of you who didn't do very well with the proposals, and if you don't have a very complete proposal, you're probably going to have some low points on that in your grade book. It's going to affect your grade, as well as not completing the Friday forums and other activities. As you see the gradebook get updated, I think many of you are going to see you have to really come on strong here at the end of the course. So I'm asking you to very, very carefully review the materials in Unit 3. This is where we're at now. We're doing our service projects. At the bottom, the resources, progress reports, and service logs. In today's lesson, I ask you to download the Community Partner Service Log, the media release form if you need it. Please get pictures, images, interviews, that sort of stuff to flesh out for your final report. Everything we're doing in the next 2 weeks is gathering material for our final report. Our final report is worth 300 points. It's the culmination of the course. Those of you who are on the bubble as far as grades, that's what's going to make or break your success in the course. You should be doing everything you can now to both document your service and be thinking through the reflective activities that we've gone over in units in this book as well, and the chapters that have dealt with what to do when you encounter setbacks and problems in your workbook. We've gone over these chapters in previous units as preparation for this. All of this should be utilized right now in the midst of your service to make sure that you're capturing as much material as possible for your final report. That should be your goal. And being how we didn't all follow the instructions for our first report, let's think about this progress report that you're going to be turning in a couple of weeks. You'll turn this progress report in, and then we'll have a very quick turnaround where you have to wrap it all up in this final report for the course. So your progress reports, here's the handout. Go over it very carefully. I've posted some videos in Unit 3 in that resources folder for you to go over, and it goes into much detail about this handout. You have to follow this format if you want to get the fullest amount of points possible. You'll notice that there's the Community Partner Service Log. You have to have signatures from your community partners testifying to the amount of service that you've done. You need to include contact information. I will contact those people and make sure that this service has been completed. All right? The other things you can do to sort of show evidence that you've completed the service is taking pictures, having images. Look at the reports that I posted in Unit 3. There's a couple of student examples that are posted right here from previous semesters. Here are the student examples. These examples show the journal entries that I'm asking you to complete. This is sort of informal writing. It's reflective writing. Remember that there are units, there are sections in this book about deep reflection. There are exercises that I'm asking you to go through specifically from the book in order to complete this part of the progress report. And now the student examples don't have the service logs, which I'm going to finish up going over here in just a second. But remember, when you turn in this report in a couple of weeks, Part 1 is going to be the service log completed with all your hours. Part 2 is going to be your service journal, which is 75% of the grade. And Part 3 is your final reflection of your service as you wrap up that portion of the activity. Follow these prompts very closely. Look at my videos going over these. You need to do better as far as following instructions if you want to do well on these activities. Note that the service journal entries ask you to use some of the exercises from the book to do deep reflection, to do a certain number of exercises and journal responses. Make sure you follow those instructions carefully. And finally, and most importantly, you have got to get this information from your community partner service blogs. You cannot just do this service on your own. So download this, make sure that you have a copy of it, and that you are filling it out completely. I need the name and agency of the partnership, the key individuals, the address, the contact information so I can contact and verify your hours. And you need to keep track of the hours that you've completed. This will be submitted with your final form Contact me if you have any questions at all. Good luck on your projects going on in the next